Hello, Leah. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. So let's talk about your business. Tell us what you do, what you're all about.
All right. Well, I am a premarital financial coach. Yes, I called off my own wedding 6 weeks prior to the wedding date due to financial incompatibility. And I launched this business to help other people avoid the mistakes that I made. So I help people determine their financial compatibility. I tell them exactly what topics they need to discuss, and I give them tools to set them up for success. And I really try to catch couples prior to when they're actually engaged. So we waited until we were actually engaged to have the conversations. And we did premarital counseling, but it was very high level, right? Mm-hmm. It's usually like people do it through church, or it's like the deacon or someone,
Sure, right.
Have those discussions, or a therapist. And also another reason I try to catch people before they're engaged is because once you announce your wedding, there's a social stigma attached to calling it off. The ring has already been purchased. You've spent money on the wedding. We had spent $40,000 already on our wedding when we called it off. Yes. So of course, at that point, we're ignoring red flags, character flaws, and just pushing forward. So that's another reason I try to catch people before they even get engaged, so that they can make those decisions beforehand before they waste all that time and money.
Well, girl, you have some, I don't even know what to call it, just all the confidence in the world. That's underselling it. You're so brave. You're so brave to do that and to just say, you know what, 6 weeks prior, and we've already put down $40,000 and I've already announced it to all the peoples. I'm not doing this. How did that come about? You don't have to go into the details of why we're not together, but what is financial compatibility and what didn't work out?
Financial compatibility. So if you're not financially compatible, it doesn't necessarily mean either one of you are bad people. You just have different views on money and how you want to manage that money. We just had different views on our goals and our vision for what we wanted our family to look like. And after a while, we just knew, okay, this isn't going to work out. And I actually have a financial compatibility quiz on my website, leahmariecollins.com, that asks each partner questions. And then where you don't align is a good place to start your money financial compatibility discussions.
Okay, so I'm obsessed with the quiz. I'll be doing that. And also, where's the line? Like, how do you know if you are almost compatible, totally not compatible? Like, how do we know when to just jump ship and call it off?
For me, it was, can I live with this for the rest of my life? Can I deal with this until I die? And if the answer is no, then there's your line. That's when you need to walk away.
Done. I love it. Fair enough.
I knew we would both be miserable, so we just had to call it off.
Good for you. I'm sure that wasn't easy, but okay. So we're $40,000 in debt. Now what happens? How did you handle that?
Yes. Okay. Back in 2017, were you talking about the wedding?
You tell me. I heard $40,000 for the wedding, but was there another $40,000?
Yes, there is.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. Lucky number 40. Okay.
But we can talk about the wedding. Fortunately, we got wedding insurance. What is it called? Wedding cancellation insurance. And what that covers, so wedding cancellation insurance doesn't cover if you cancel your wedding. Wedding cancellation insurance is if a vendor backs out or doesn't show up, things of that nature. But there's also a clause in there for like natural disasters, a bunch of things that usually don't happen, like a zombie apocalypse. What is it called?
Apocalypse. I hear you. Yeah.
Like things like that. And one of them was a pandemic, but this was pre-pandemic. So it's like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
right?
You're like,
right. So I purchased it just in case like vendors backed out or there was some issue like that. But there was a pandemic that happened. So that's how we were able to get all of our money back.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was some saving grace for the pandemic. I'm glad something good came out of that. Really glad to hear that. Okay, so what about this other $40,000?
Okay, so back in 2017, I decided I wanted to be debt-free. I had made the most money I'd ever made, well into the six figures at that point. I was doing my taxes and I realized I had absolutely nothing to show for it. My savings was the same as it had been when I graduated college, like 10 years prior. My investments weren't growing. So I decided to do something about it. I took a financial course. You probably heard of Dave Ramsey. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
So I took his course. And then within 18 months, I paid off $40,000 worth of debt. I purchased investment property and increased my credit score to over 800. And that's when I first launched my business because people reached out to me asking me to help them. So I decided, okay, I can show other people how to become financially free, financially independent as well. So I launched that business in 2019. And then after my engagement got called off, I decided to focus on couples and helping them avoid the mistakes that I made.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I heard that you were doing your personal debt, then you meet fiance, and then you guys do the wedding thing. Okay, very cool. So by that point, you fully knew your financial personality or your financial persona about yourself. How did you approach that financial conversation with your soon-to-be husband? Like, how did you get to the point where you were like, ooh, I don't think we're really that compatible?
So we met a long time ago. We actually met in college and we dated off and on for a very long time, like 10, 12 years.
Nice.
Over that time, I saw how he managed his money and he managed it very well. So I thought we were fine. So I should have known better, but we didn't have those discussions because he saw how I managed my money. I saw how he managed his. So we thought we were good. It wasn't until we got into premarital counseling, once we realized our goals were different, or our goals are pretty much the same for the most part. We just had different ways of getting there. There were also huge cultural differences. He is Nigerian American. I'm like Black African American. So there's a lot of similarities, but there's huge differences. And one of those differences is Nigerians, they have more of a collectivist culture, society. Do you know what that is?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of like the community as a whole. There's a hierarchy there, whereas Americans are more individualistic. And what that would look like in our relationship is if we had a disagreement, maybe I want to talk about it between us, but he wants to bring the mothers in and the aunts. Yeah. And not saying anything's wrong with it, but that's just not how I function.
You know, big differences. Yeah.
Right. Or Nigerians, most of them like fully fund their parents' retirement. Like their parents usually don't have any money saved up and they're paying for everything. The siblings, the children are paying for everything. Whereas with us, usually our parents have something saved, some kind of retirement or pension. And so you can see how that could possibly be an issue as well.
Totally. Especially if you're building your own family, you know, how do you start to create boundaries that make sense for both of you when it is clearly, you know, extremely different? Okay. So let's go back to prior to meeting fiance, you have all this debt and you decide you're going to do something about it. What's the first thing you did? You took the Dave Ramsey course. You learned a lot from that. And then how did you actually implement it into your daily life?
Okay. So the first step in his course is to save. It's $1,000. I already had that saved. The next step is to pay off debt. So you start with your smallest debt. So that's what I did. My smallest debt was a credit card, maybe like $300. So I started there. And the goal is to have small wins, and those wins give you momentum to keep going. So that's what happened. Once I saw, oh, okay, I did this, it made it easier for me to tackle the next step. And I'm just very intense anyway.
I love it.
I'm so intense. So that's what I did. And so after I paid off that first debt, I took that money and threw it towards the next step. And then I think another thing was just having accountability. So the program was in a group setting and we would meet each week. So it's just nice to have that sense of community and you sit there and like share your goals and your progress with other people who are going through the same thing that you're going through. So after a few months, I had the habit of saving and not eating out. I would do Uber Eats for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day.
Guilty. Yeah.
Right. So you develop those habits. And after a while, it just becomes second nature. It becomes easy to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So I heard it's a big lifestyle change. It's a little commitment that builds into a bigger, you know, commitment to yourself, and you're relearning habits and all the things. What would you say is like the best thing that's happened to you after going through this experience besides paying off your debt?
It's just opened the door to so many different opportunities, like through launching my business, I've met some incredible people. I've been contacted by Hollywood to create like a production company to create a reality show. So that's in the works.
Come on. Good job. All right.
But before, like, I just wouldn't have had the time or the network or the access, to those people and to those communities. And it's just the sense of peace that comes with it. I remember when the pandemic hit and everyone was freaking out, especially people with kids. And I just remember thinking, I don't have to worry about that. Like, I have savings, I have investments, I was good. So that's the biggest thing is the peace, the freedom, and the network and the access and opportunities that I've developed because of it.
Incredible. Okay, so we had this debt, we paid it off, and then I heard you bought some investment properties. Is that correct?
Correct.
How did you make that jump going from I'm in debt to now having some sort of residual income happening for me on the side?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I'm sorry. I said, how did you go from being in $40,000 worth of debt to actually having some residual income with an investment property?
Got you. So the story is kind of weird.
I'm here for it.
Tell the real story. Okay, I'll just tell the real story. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I had this cat. His name, it's such a weird story.
I'm here for it.
The moral of the story is you make lemons out of lemonade. You work with what you have. So I was living in Texas at the time, and I got a job offer from Deloitte in DC. And I had a cat at the time. I needed to hurry up and move within a month. I had an aunt that lived there. She said I could live with her because I didn't have time to find a place to stay. She said I could live there, but I couldn't bring my cat. So my cat stayed with my father for a while. He agreed to take him. But eventually, eventually my father got tired of the cat and was like, come get this cat. So I started looking for my own place to stay in DC. I was looking for an apartment and they were really expensive. So I decided, well, I might as well get a house. So I got a house and then moved my cat out there. So I always say I bought the house because of Butters.
Oh, cute.
But getting out of debt allowed me to do that. And one thing that I did, have you heard of house hacking?
No.
So house hacking is when you live in one bedroom and you rent other bedrooms out in your house. Other people pay your mortgage or a share of your mortgage. So that's what I did. I rented out the other bedrooms and then that paid my mortgage.
That is brilliant. Yeah. Okay. So were you single at the time? Was that hard to do?
Not really. In DC, DC is a very transient city. So it's very easy to find roommate.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's part of the culture. It's not a big deal. Working professionals living together to be financially smart and do the thing together. Yeah. Okay.
And amazing. Almost all my roommates were coworkers who had similar goals. So they moved in with me until they had time to save and build their savings up to buy a house. All of my roommates were in that situation.
It sounds like you just like oozing this energy where people are just, they're like, okay, I can do that too.
Yes.
Okay. So what's the first thing you would tell someone that's in your position that's like, oh, I'd love to have an investment property. I'd love to buy my own place, but I've got all this debt. What's the first thing they should do?
I would say try to pay off as much of your debt as possible and save up as large. I wish I had saved up a larger down payment. You don't have to do that, but I would definitely say pay off as much debt as you can, because when you get a house, there are so many expenses that come about that you may not even plan for. Like I moved into a condo and within a year, we had to spend like $40,000 on repairs in the place, right?
Right.
So really take into account not only like your closing costs and down payment and things like that, but also all the other costs that could come into play. Have an emergency fund set aside specifically for home repairs and things of that nature.
Okay. And what about for people that are just happy renting, but they just can't seem to get out of this debt that they have? What's a daily practice that they could manage to start getting themselves out of debt?
Well, I would suggest getting a roommate. Most people's largest expense is rent, are their living expenses, rent and utilities. And it's not always the ideal situation, but that's where screening comes into play. If you do a great job screening, you'll usually probably find someone that you can live with. And so that's what I did. And what I would do is I wouldn't lock people in for a contract, because if we didn't get along, I wanted them to go. Mm-hmm. And they were the same way. So fortunately, I never had to kick anyone out, but you can make it flexible to where it works for both parties. So just in case things don't work out, you can tell them to leave.
Amazing. All right. So let's talk about some premarital financial counseling. What I heard earlier is there is a time to do it, and it's not after you get the rock. It's way before. So how do we start that conversation with a potential partner? And how do we even know if maybe that's the right partner to have that conversation with?
So I always tell people there's ways to bring up the conversation subtly. I'm bringing it up during our very first date. And
I love it.
But you don't have to just come out and say, how much money do you make, right? Like you can talk about, so I have investment property. So maybe I'm talking about my investment property. So naturally it's going to go into investing and home ownership and the current state of the real estate market. Or maybe you're looking for a new job. You can start talking about that and salary negotiation. There's always ways to bring up money subtly. I have a business. I help people do this. So I can be talking about my business. And again, it's naturally going to flow into money. And then it's just a good way to gauge someone's money mindset.
Okay, talk to me about a money mindset. What is considered a positive one, or maybe one that needs a little bit of love?
Okay, a positive money mindset is someone who has goals and a vision for their future and how they want their money to be spent. Mindset is basically your thoughts and behaviors that are surrounded, that revolve around money. Someone who doesn't have a good money mindset would be someone who doesn't have a plan, who doesn't have a future, who doesn't care about paying off their credit, who doesn't care about investing, doesn't see the importance of it. Or who doesn't want to talk about money? If someone doesn't want to talk about money, that could be a red flag.
Completely agree. Over here at HelloPrenup, we see that all the time, where it's one partner is really interested in having a conversation, but the other is just, gun shy about it for whatever reasons. And I think there's a lot of shame in talking about money. There's a lot of, judgment, especially because, if somebody comes from, let's say a better upbringing than the other, or for whatever reason, they hit a rough patch and they have to talk to their significant other about a patch that they went through that they're currently still working through. What is a way to delicately bring it up if the other person, might have some guilt, or vice versa? How do you get rid of that guilt if you have it yourself and, portray a positive money mindset?
I think it's just how you approach the conversation. Just approach it with love and be gentle and just talk about why it's important. And one thing that really works with my clients is starting with your goals and your vision, right? To me, there's nothing more romantic than discussing your future with your partner. So you can just start that way.
Mm-hmm. Very fair. Okay, cool. And have you heard or dealt with anybody that has any questions about a prenup?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, good. Okay. What kind of conversations come around that?
More and more. I'm sorry.
No problem. I was saying, what kind of conversations have you heard or are being brought up on your end?
Okay. Well, I have a lot of people who don't see the point in having a prenup. And I think a common misconception is you only need a prenup if you're wealthy. You only need a prenup if you had a significant amount of assets going into the marriage. A lot of people say it's not romantic. A sure way to end your relationship or not even get married is to bring up a prenup. I had friends tell me, do not bring it up. Yeah. But there are a lot of people who are for prenups, right? They want to protect their assets. People are getting married a lot later. They want to protect what they have. But I also tell people that prenups are mostly for what you obtain and build through the marriage, like during the marriage, right? So I always have to do a lot of educating because people think it's just protecting what they already had. Usually that's already protected. That's considered like separate property, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times I'm just educating people on what a prenup really is, what it really means, and why it's so important for everyone, in my opinion, to have.
Absolutely. And we see that all the time as well. There's still a stigma around it, but yet we're also seeing a higher demand. So I think it's a little less taboo these days. But what is your take on a prenup? Do you think it's a good idea for someone to have one? And if so, what kind of person should have one?
100% I agree. Everyone should have one.
Amen.
And I think people don't realize that prenups are usually a negotiation. It's just not what one person wants. There's a conversation there and it could benefit both people.
Absolutely. Before I worked for this company, I actually went through the prenup process. And we had a huge division of wealth. You know, he made a lot more than I did at the time. And it was really difficult because it was very obvious that he was going to serve me with the question. And when he did, I did not know it was a negotiation. And so I learned a lot the hard way, which is you have the right to actually rebuttal and say, no, in the event that, you know, you die, this has to happen. Or while we're married, you know, everything is yours. But in the event of a divorce, this is how we're going to separate assets. Here's what happens to our community property. Here's what happens when we have kids. And I did not realize that a lot of it, like you said, is actually what happens, not just prior to your marriage, but also during. So what kind of advice would you give an engaged couple that is, you know, looking to build some sort of like financial plan or portfolio to build their wealth starting now?
I would tell them, of course, to start having money discussions early. Figure out what your goals and what your vision are, what your goals and vision are. I would probably tell them to speak with some type of financial planner. I think that's a huge, I think that's something big that people should do for sure. And whether you want a prenup or not, just consider it. Just talk to an attorney. Just get the knowledge. You know, I always encourage my clients, just talk to an attorney to see what they have to say, to see how it would benefit you. Because like you said, there's so many misconceptions out there and people just don't have the knowledge. I would also say, I think those are the main things I would say. Just have discussions early and don't wait until it's too late. That's what I did. Don't waste so much time like I did.
Totally. And I like something you said, which is, you know, of course, have them early, but just look into it. You know, One of the things that we talk about is prenup is like marriage insurance. You know, you really have it when you need it. And if you are truly going to stay married forever, you know, then what's the point of, you know, not having that conversation, or the lack thereof, I think is actually pretty wasteful in that event. So, okay. So I heard everyone should get a prenup. And are you looking to get married again? Are you open to that concept possibly?
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Yes, I hear you. And
into it. We'll see.
That's fair. I know. I think it's tough. It's like, okay, well, maybe. And also, I'm sure now as a business owner and you have your own assets and you're doing well for yourself, it's hard to say, okay, are we really going to share or not?
Exactly. And I have a child now too. You know, that could affect my child if we get a divorce. And that's very important as well. People don't realize that.
Absolutely. So that's interesting because you would go into a marriage with a child. Interesting. Okay. If people are interested in getting to know more about you or start budgeting and get themselves, you know, out of some sort of financial trouble, or they want to start building their premarital financial portfolio, how do they get in touch with you?
You can go to my website, leahmariecollins.com, and you can join the wait list. Currently, my sessions are full, but I'm opening enrollment in the spring, and you can sign up for group coaching or one-on-one sessions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Leah.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Of course. Until we see you in the next episode. Thank you so much, fiancés. Bye-bye.